Hello and welcome to NDTV Profit. We are on the sidelines of the IDMA organized event Riddhi 2024, and we've had a chance to catch up with Dr. Amit Varma of Quadria Capital. Thank you so much for taking our time to speak to us. And it's a pharma and healthcare summit, so who better to have on board than you, of course, for this discussion.
Well, thank you for the kind words and thank you for having me.
So what currently in the pharma and healthcare space really excites you?
See, one of the things that's going on right now is that we are on the cusp of this great momentum in healthcare where everything is on the upswing. And this is a post-COVID phenomena where 2-3 fundamental shifts took place. One, pretty much everybody from the street all the way up to public policy understood that we have never invested enough in healthcare. Number two, we only spend 2 to 3% of our GDP in healthcare, which is never going to be enough. So the third biggest sentiment that is taking place is public-private partnerships, and smarter private capital in all aspects of healthcare are playing a predominant role. Now, one of the fundamentals of life in healthcare, especially in emerging Asia, is you take a normal healthcare company, leave it alone, it will grow 15% year on year. Now, if you can bring smarter capital on top of it, you can grow them almost 20 to 25%. So quite clearly, as I look at themes in both services, medtech, life sciences, and even consumer health, anything which is direct to the patient, everything is growing.
So let's break this up. So you're saying that every segment is growing. So you have investments across all sectors. So, and it's pretty diverse. So now if you had to pick one sector out of these, for the medium and the long term, what do you think will stay and see just as much growth that you're envisaging?
I'm going to answer it slightly differently because sitting at the sidelines of a pharma conference, I want to make sure I do justice. But I want to leave you with an underlying theme of whether I do services, I do life sciences, consumer health or medtech. Our core philosophy is betting on specialization and deepening of the verticals. So if I'm going to look at hospitals, I like single specialty hospitals. When I look at pharma, I like single specialty or specialized APIs. I do like CDMOs, but at the end of the day, I still like to bet on people having domain expertise and going deeper. I don't like to build service industries which are pan-Asian. Those look very good on PowerPoints. Finally, healthcare delivery is an individual, localized business. But when I look at life sciences, on the other hand, I want to manufacture in Asia at Asian manufacturing costs, but manufacture for the world. So my theme changes based on what sub-sector segment I'm looking at. And as we go forward, as we talk a bit more, I can throw a bit more light as we go sub-vertical on the other.
I'm going to start off with CDMO. Recently the whole China plus one theme that was being sold is not quite playing out as much, and the sector is not showing as much growth. Even the listed companies that I've been looking at haven't quite been performing as much. So do you believe there's a turnaround in store for these companies?
So I'm a bit biased because we are investors in Akums, which, as you may know, is probably one of the larger CDMO players out here. The past couple of years have been challenging in this space just because of the cost of raw materials, the inflation surrounding it, and the human capital cost continues to grow year on year. And you quite honestly cannot take the cost of manufacturing and pass it along to the customer. There's just too many variables there. But what we are seeing grow now is the scale size of the CDMO industry. I think you are getting rewarded for the quality of the products that you're generating. And for us, we are getting into sub-themes or sub-sectors of manufacturing which we never did before. So overall, there is a manufacturing. CDMO, unfortunately, will never be as attractive or as sexy as the other aspects of life. But at the end of the day, this is bread and butter for what you need for a country. So as long as we are clear that we are going to be the largest in what we do, as diverse in what we can do, but more importantly, start to create sub-verticalization, again the specialization themes that I was discussing with you, I think the CDMO sector will see a turnaround.
Okay. So I'm picking on from your super specialization theme, and this is something that you brought up about hospitals as well. Now, say there's a retail investor who wishes to, you have quite a few investments in the hospital space, of course, but a retail investor wanting to invest in hospitals, what are the operational matrices that you should see? Because we have very few super specialty hospitals that are listed, of course, more are coming in. But what would you look at while investing in a hospital?
I think you need to get beyond the simple version of looking at revenue, EBITDA, and then cash generation. At the end of the day, as we start to look at hospitals, we look at a couple of dominant things. These are obvious, right? At the end of the day, you want to look at. You also want to look at their growth, what their occupancies look like, and more importantly, what their average length of stay is, because that tells me what the capacity is. The world of hospitals has moved away from just creating more and more beds. It costs an arm and a leg to create a tertiary care bed right now. A lot of our focus at investment and post-investment goes into effectively utilizing those beds. So we borrow shamelessly. So we borrowed from the telecom industry. They use something called ARPU, average revenue per user. We use ARPOB, average revenue per occupied bed. Now, if the cost of creating the bed is going to be the same, whether I treat malaria on it or I do a knee transplant, clearly my yield is going to be different. So, as we look at hospitals, we try and see how we can make them more specialized. We try and see what is the higher end specialties that we can do. And we usually like a nice surgical to medical mix, usually 60 to 40. And those would be the matrices that we look at. And last but not least, which has been underplayed in the Indian context quite a lot, is clinical quality. How are you measuring yourself against the best in the world? What is your infection rate? What is your attrition of nurses? What is going to be the outcomes for a patient when they come to you? What is the price? We are a price sensitive market. 50% of my patients are still paying out of pocket, so they look at what the cost is going to be. But I think the introduction now of bringing in clinical quality is going to become more and more important, because it's going to be very hard to differentiate between brands.
So, just adding on to one thing that you spoke about, ARPOB. There's a lot of talk on the general insurance side that they're all going to come together and have a common empanelment rate for hospitals. So do you believe that is going to impact the hospital industry? I mean, because the kind of boom that we are seeing in the past 1 year, the amount of discussion that's happening, the number of hospitals that are listing, it's phenomenal. So just trying to get a sense of, is this fervor expected to continue?
Well, you hit on my pet theme. See, at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, healthcare is about life and death, and healthcare is about impact. And there is only that much limited price gouging that I can do. I am in an industry where it is about saving lives. So clearly, whether it is led by the industry or insurance industry, or it is led by us internally, there is rationalization of pricing that will come through. So I'm not worried about the insurance guys coming together. At the end of the day, it comes out of somebody's pocket in some form or shape. That's going to be the patient, and that's what I'm sensitive about. But I think the way we address this is that pretty much all our hospitals have one very fundamental common theme. I will always have general wards, I will always have private wards, and I'll always have suites. And the pricing ability that I have in the hospital will finally boil down to what we do without compromising on clinical quality, regardless of which sector or which ward you're coming from.
So now I'm going to pick on the other theme, which is APIs. You have an investment there as well. So a lot of PLI schemes, there's still quite a lot of dependency on China. So are you seeing more interest, more investment come into the API space? How is the Indian scenario transforming? And what sort of companies are maybe doing it right in the API KSM space?
See, China plus one is a very nice headline. To make that plus one work requires a lot of intrinsic changes in behavior, even within the pharma industry. And I know I'm going to get some flack for it, but I'm still going to go ahead and say it. I think we in the industry in India also need to change to start to demand better quality of how we manufacture. And it should not be top-led. I don't think it should be regulatory-led. It should be self-inflicted. That's number one. Number two, the changes that we are beginning to see is that you cannot wish China away. The cost of manufacturing will continue to be extremely competitive for them because of the scale and size that they've already set up. I think the role and the area that we can get into is specialized APIs, because Concord Biotech, one of our success stories, I mean, the whole theme around that was being in the fermentation space. Now, fermentation is an art. It is not maths. So, backing a promoter and backing a company which is doing a very high-end procedure like fermentation and creating transplant and oncology medication to us at Quadria is the theme that we go after. So, go after things that people cannot do well because it requires a certain skill set. Scale it up to a size that it then becomes cost prohibitive for others to come and compete against you, and then sell to the world. In one line, this was our entire investment theme into Concord.
Okay. So, I mean, apart from Concord, are there other companies that are on your radar that are doing it right in terms of API? Any formulation makers who are also backward integrating in the right manner to maybe regulate their supply chain and do a great
I think the
job?
whole industry is going through a change right now, and people are betting forward and backwards now into making sure that they're creating their own lines of support. So when you look at the bets that people like Divi have taken, for example, when they've turned around and they bet on something which people did not see, they hunkered down on the capex that they were spending at that point of time. Every time you had a conversation with them, it was very hard to figure out where this was heading to and see what they have done. So I think there are going to be 10 Divi examples in the next 5 years that you'll see out of India, where there is going to be both forward and backward integration.
Okay. That's very interesting. So after COVID, you'd also spoken that a lot of telemedicines, teleconsultations had picked up. Do you still think that theme is just as relevant, or are you seeing a turn back that people are going back to hospitals, going back for physical consultations, and this might not be as big of a theme to bet on as
10 years ago, I bet on tele-ICUs, where we created the largest network of critical care beds in India, Nepal and Bangladesh. And we had almost 500 ICU beds that we were managing. I'm talking 2015, 2016. Now we were before our time, and clearly COVID came and accelerated it. My personal view is that there is now going to be an integrated model of patient care, where patients will not travel to mega centers to get treated, but mega centers will have to go to where people live. Healthcare is local. Nobody likes to travel 500 kilometers to get treated. So the theme that I'm going to get to you is finally going to be about telemedicine will be integrated within our practices. The hype around treating acute patients will come down, but chronic patients will see the benefit of getting treated, and the doctors are seeing it. The biggest culprits of any change in medicine is not the patient, is usually the doctor, and I can get away by saying that. And I think I've seen the fundamental shift in doctors now beginning to understand that seeing patients on telemedicine for chronic conditions. How is your blood pressure? What is the trend of your blood sugar? Okay, do you need to tweak your medications? I can do that in 15 minutes on telemedicine, rather than wasting the patient's whole day of coming out to see me. So, for want of better words, it's going to be an integrated model of outpatients, and we will see certain specialized areas of tele-ICUs, telepathology and teleradiology.
Interesting. And so how does medtech come in the picture in between all of this?
So medtech is always going to now, at least the trend that I am seeing now is, again, we are getting into specialization of what we create and what we manufacture. So whether it is things like orthopedic implants, it is cardiac stents, it is now going to be pathology, things that we do, you are going to again see, and you must be bored of me by now, but you are going to again see specialization.
Okay.
So there are going to be very few players who, right now, everybody tries to do everything. If I use the word orthopedic implants, they want to do everything in orthopedic implants. Now I'm going to begin to see guys who only do screws, who only do nails, who will only do that, and we are seeing that. In India, because we have so much of infrastructure, again the specialization is, and the market is going to reward that kind of specialization.
So then among the bigger names right now in the pharma space, the listed space and the big names, who do you think is investing correctly in the right direction towards the future? You know, the future that you are alluding to. What company will actually be the value creator, say 5 years down the line?
Yeah, that's the kind of question which always will get me into trouble, especially here with all the stalwarts surrounding me. Having said that, I do believe overall as an industry, I think now the desire and need, and more importantly, the realization that you will never succeed if you don't invest in R&D and the future is sinking in. And it is going beyond the top 10 for top 15 players. Now when I come to conferences like this, the theme around why you need to invest capex and why do you need to invest in the future is already coming into the mid-market level. I already alluded to the Divis of the world who I think have done a spectacular job, but there are many others who are sitting on the sidelines who are again getting into things like vaccines, getting into specialized APIs, where I think you will see the players break out in the next 3 to 5 years. Just remember one thing, we're in the short window.
Yeah.
All this hype about China being down and out, this is going to turn a cycle very quickly. Fortunately for us, the macro, the geopolitics, and what we are seeing in the political stability and economic regulator stability is helping create those big tailwinds in pushing what is happening. And I think if we don't grasp that opportunity, we may end up at the short end of the stick a bit later.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Entirely my pleasure and look forward to engaging on these topics again.